Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss, read by the authors. Saturday, July 29th, 2017. Epilogue, Michael, 11:04 a.m. It was, without a doubt, the best kiss of my life. I could still feel it, not just in my lips, but right down to the depths of my soul every time I closed my eyes. Even now, even after all of this water under the bridge between us. So much had happened to separate us. But now, after all this time, we had rediscovered the magic we'd found in one another. I yawned, my body's quest for oxygen reminding me how little sleep I'd gotten last night. But even the yawn wasn't able to break the stupid grin I knew I'd been sporting since late yesterday afternoon, when I finally came back out of the hazy comatose state I had been in for a solid 2 weeks. It felt strange to be grinning. But in the past 15 or so hours, I'd done a hell of a lot of grinning, laughing, and lovemaking, as Gail and I had rediscovered the powerful and soul-fulfilling us that we'd first discovered all those years ago, and then had spent a half-dozen years hopelessly denying. I had certainly gotten more than my fair share of sleep those 2 weeks prior, because even when I was awake and sitting up in front of the television, I was more of a mindless zombie sleeping with my eyes open. At least the laugh tracks and repetitive sitcom storylines were better than the nightmares I'd continued to relive every time sleep pulled me back down into its clutches. Sleep was supposed to be an escape, a refuge. But the same seductive darkness of sleep's promise to take the pain away always led to a horrific funhouse maze of mirrors, forcing me to face what I had wanted to escape. To sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. Fucking Shakespeare. He captured that juxtaposition so brilliantly. That promise of escape into sleep consistently led to haunted dreams filled with crystal clear memories of every single action I'd taken and not taken in that final battle. Of hearing Lex admit what she'd always known about my feelings for Gail. Of watching her purposely release her grip on that steel railing. Of knowing she had made that sacrifice to ensure Gail and I lived. Of Lex's last words. Say you'll remember me. Of course I'll remember her. I could never forget her. She was a remarkable woman. Meeting her had changed my life, and she would always be in my heart. I did love Lex, but as much as I tried to deny it to myself and everyone else, I still also loved Gail. Those feelings, though buried, had never truly gone away. Lex knew that. And yet she never let it stop her from continuing on, from loving me unconditionally, and even from loving Gail. As confused as I'd been, trying to pretend I wasn't deeply in love with two women at the same time, I was even more befuddled by how the three of us had gotten along so well. Lex and Gail should have hated one another. They should have both hated me for my role in a frustrating love triangle. And yet, that hadn't been the focus. We had all been dedicated to working collaboratively to prevent the PFA from their growing attacks, from the spreading of hatred, white supremacy, and of fear. I sometimes wonder if, ironic as it appears, the proud fighters for America actually brought Gail, Lex, and me closer than we ever could have been without their threat. While the larger PFA organization was no longer an immediate concern, a few dangerous members with enhanced powers remained at large. As we talked last night, Gail had filled me in on updates from Special Agent Reynolds and Detective Wagner about what they knew and were willing to share with us. It was inevitable that Gail and I would need to be prepared to face them again, and be ready to fight against the evil and hatred that led to violence and crime. But for now, I was okay with facing what had just happened between us, figuring out my future with Gail. As I scrubbed the frying pan used for the omelet I'd made for us earlier this morning, I made a mental list of the food I would pick up to replenish the fridge. I had, after all, used up the last egg, the last bits of meat, the last drop of milk, and the last vegetables in the house in making that omelette, which we'd needed to refill the calories of all the laughing and the lovemaking we'd done since yesterday evening. As I was making the list of groceries in my head, I added the things I might need as the fixings for a romantic picnic. After breakfast, Gail had left for the first time in 2 weeks. She'd headed back to her place to check in on her store, and she planned on returning again mid-afternoon. So I knew I had plenty of time to head out and pick up the supplies before she returned. Neither of our previous attempts at a picnic had worked out. But this one would. Instead of heading over to Central Park, we would have it here in my apartment. I wasn't done with my rediscovery of every curve, every inch of Gail's magnificent body. And I wasn't interested in either of us getting arrested for indecent exposure or lewd public displays of affection in a city park. We had so much missed time to make up for. But our life together had begun anew, and there was no way I was going to let that go. Being with Gail was like being home for the first time in my life, and I cherished that place with every fiber of my being. Considering what had happened a little over 2 weeks ago, considering the nightmare this entire city had been facing, it was an odd contrast to be able to feel the gigantic grin my face refused to let go of. So, when I detected the familiar scent of the two of them outside my door, even before the solid and measured 3-beat knock came, I should have done my best to ignore it. I should have covered my ears and blurted out the sing-song, "Blah, blah, blah, I can't hear you." I should have rushed to the bedroom, thrown the sheets over my head, and returned to the nightmares that had consumed me for the previous 2 weeks. I should have dropped the frying pan into the hot, soapy water, gone to the window, and launched myself out of it. I should have done anything except walk over to the door while drying my hands on the dish towel. Because the emotions I was reading from the two of them clearly let me know this was not a social call. This was a meeting to deliver the type of terrible news I would never want to hear. When I opened the door, I looked into the faces of two people I hadn't seen in a half-dozen years. Gail's brother Ben and her ex-best friend, Isabeau. "Andrews," Ben said, his face deadpan and darker than I remember the first and only time we'd met at that 4th of July picnic. The smell coming off him told me his fear and hatred for me was richer and thicker than it had ever been, as if it had been marinating for all these years. "We need to talk." I couldn't look Isabeau in the eyes, but she gave off a combination of compassion and fear. Come on in," I said, stepping aside. "Is this about Gail? Did something happen? Is she okay?" They moved inside and I closed the door. "No," Isabeau said. "She is not okay. You are not okay. The world is not okay." "What are you talking about? Where is Gail?" "You can't see her again." "The hell I can't," I growled. "It might already be too late. You two opened something up I've been trying to prevent since you first came into my sister's life," Ben said. "It's not about you two. It's about something bigger. You just undid years of hard work, centuries of legacy. There are consequences." "Consequences," Isabeau said, "that go far beyond just the two of you." My heart was racing, and I found it difficult to breathe. "I don't understand." "Sit down, Andrews," Ben said. "You're definitely going to need to be sitting down for this." The end. The story will continue in Hex and the City by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. You've been listening to Lover's Moon, a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.